You're in your backyard, nothing unusual about it, coffee cooling in your hand. The same tree you've ignored for years standing exactly where it always stood. Quiet, predictable, almost invisible in its familiarity. The kind of presence you stop noticing because it never asks for attention. And yet, a few meters away, your neighbor's tree stands within reach of something you can't see. Because beneath the soil, beyond what your senses were designed to detect, both of them are actively exchanging information, signals, warnings, resources, not metaphorically, biologically. The stillness is misleading. What looks like silence is coordination. What looks like isolation is, in fact, connection. You're not looking at two separate trees. You're looking at a network. If that image changed even slightly the way you see your backyard, consider leaving a like, because this is only the surface. And if you're curious about the quiet system shaping the world around you, subscribe to Backyard Biology. We explore the science that's been there all along, waiting to be noticed. Before we go further, I'm curious, what's the most unexpected thing you've ever found growing in your backyard? Let's start with what's visible, because that's usually where curiosity ends. When a tree is under attack, insects, fungi, something slowly chewing through its bark, it doesn't remain passive. Within hours, it begins releasing volatile organic compounds, or VOCs. These are airborne chemical signals, drifting outward from leaves and branches. They're not vague or accidental. They're specific, structured, and measurable under controlled conditions. What's striking is how consistently other trees respond. Across dozens of controlled experiments, the majority show the same pattern. Nearby trees detect these signals and adjust their behavior. Not occasionally, but reliably enough that it's become difficult to dismiss as coincidence. Some of the earliest evidence came in the 1980s, when researchers observed willow and poplar trees increasing their chemical defenses after neighboring trees were infested. Even though they themselves had not yet been touched, they weren't reacting to damage. They were anticipating it. In simpler terms, one tree releases a warning into the air. Another receives it, interprets it, and alters its internal chemistry, sometimes within hours. More recent work has gone deeper, tracking the process in real time. A 2023 study identified specific compounds, green, leaf volatiles, that trigger calcium signals inside neighboring plants. These signals move through tissues like a quiet alarm system, cell by cell, branch by branch. The receiving tree isn't just exposed to information, it acts on it. And this isn't limited to rare ecosystems. The same mechanisms have been observed in ordinary trees, the kind you pass every day without noticing. The air above your yard isn't empty space. It's a medium, carrying signals, translating stress into chemistry, turning distance into connection. And as intricate as that sounds, it's only part of what's happening. Beneath the soil, the story becomes far less visible and far more complex. Beneath your lawn, right now, under a layer of soil that looks completely ordinary, there is a network. It's built from fungal threads called mycorrhizae. They're microscopic, almost impossibly fine, yet densely woven. In healthy soil, a single teaspoon can contain kilometers of these filaments. They spread outward, linking root to root, tree to tree, forming a system scientists often refer to as the Wood Wide Web. The name sounds playful. The structure is anything but. This network is ancient, nearly 500 million years old. Long before forests looked the way they do today, before animals moved onto land, this system was already in place, quietly shaping how plants survive. A useful comparison is the old underground cable systems that once connected entire neighborhoods, hidden from view, but constantly active. Trees connect into this network, and through it they exchange what they need: water, carbon, nitrogen, phosphorus. Not in theory, but in measurable transfers tracked by isotopes moving from one organism to another. What's more surprising is how uneven those exchanges can be. Larger, older trees, sometimes called mother trees, a term introduced by forest ecologist Suzanne Samard, don't distribute resources randomly. They tend to channel more carbon toward nearby saplings, especially those genetically related to them. It's not generosity in a human sense, but it is selective support. Decades of field research have pushed this idea further. Forests behave less like collections of individuals and more like interconnected systems with structure and flow. And that changes the scale of consequence. Because if trees are linked through a shared network, then removing one isn't an isolated event. It's more like pulling a point out of a grid. The effects ripple outward, altering connections you never saw to begin with. What's easy to overlook is how close this system might be. You don't have to be deep in a forest to find it. Under the right conditions, even a suburban yard can be part of this network, which means the ground beneath you may not be separate from anything at all. Right now, as you read this, some version of this is already happening in your backyard. If you have two trees within roughly 50 meters of each other, there is a real, measurable chance their roots are connected through the same mycorrhizal network, not because anything coordinated it, but because the fungi themselves are constantly expanding, threading through soil, seeking new roots, linking one organism to the next as they grow. This isn't something reserved for dense forests. It shows up in suburban spaces, along fence lines, beneath driveways, under garden beds. Studies have identified these networks in city parks, landscaped areas, even in neighborhoods with only a handful of tall or mature trees. The system doesn't require wilderness. It only requires time and living roots. And the connections aren't limited by species. An oak can be linked to a maple, a birch to a fir. The fungi form partnerships based on opportunity, not category. The boundaries we draw, property lines, species labels, don't exist at that level. By 2019, researchers had mapped mycorrhizal networks on a global scale and found something difficult to ignore. This underground web is not rare. It dominates soil. Ecosystems across most of the planet, from boreal forests to tropical regions to temperate urban environments. It's not the exception, it's the default. So in practical terms, your tree isn't standing alone. It functions as a node within a larger system, connected chemically, biologically, even electrically to what surrounds it. It sends signals, it receives them, and it adjusts. In conditions like drought, for example, stressed trees release signals into both air and soil. Nearby trees detect those cues and begin conserving water, changing how their stomata behave before the stress fully reaches them. They don't need repeated warnings. This has been happening continuously, quietly, since the moment those roots first entered the ground. And what researchers are beginning to uncover now, about how trees decide where to send resources within that network, starts to shift the way we think about every tree we've ever planted. Here's the part that tends to slip past even people who already love this subject. The mycorrhizal network isn't just a neutral set of connections. It doesn't simply move resources from point A to point B. It filters, allocates, and, in a sense, negotiates. And the trees connected to it aren't passive. They influence what flows through the system, how much of it moves, and where it ends up. Research from Suzanne Simard's lab showed that larger, established trees can distinguish between their own offspring and unrelated seedlings nearby. In controlled conditions, genetically related saplings received more carbon through the network than their neighbors growing in the exact same soil, connected to the same fungal web. The difference wasn't subtle, it was measurable. At the same time, the fungi themselves are not just intermediaries. They are partners with their own incentives. A tree can allocate a significant portion of the carbon it produces, sometimes close to a third, to these fungi. In exchange, the fungi extend far beyond the reach of roots, extracting phosphorus and other nutrients from the soil and delivering them back. It's an exchange shaped over hundreds of millions of years, with both sides adjusting to the other. But that relationship has limits. The network can be disrupted in ways that are almost impossible to detect from the surface. Soil compaction, certain agricultural practices, and fungicides can break these connections without any immediate visual change. A tree may continue to look stable while its support system has already been compromised. This helps explain a pattern many people have seen without understanding. Newly planted trees that fail despite careful watering and maintenance. In many cases, they've been removed from any existing network. They're placed into soil where the connections haven't reformed, effectively isolated at a biological level. The network in that sense isn't just beneficial. For many trees, it appears to be foundational. And once you start to see what that system is actually doing, quietly, continuously, just beneath your feet, the implications extend beyond the trees themselves in ways that are not immediately obvious. We tend to think in terms of what we give our trees: water, nutrients, the right conditions to grow. We plant them carefully, monitor the soil, prune what's damaged, The logic feels straightforward. We maintain them, and they depend on us. That assumption sits quietly in the background of almost everything we do in a yard. But the research points in a direction that's harder to notice. In environments where trees are actively exchanging compounds, dense canopy, living soil, functioning microbial networks, there are consistent physiological effects on the people who spend time there. Lower cortisol, reduced blood pressure, measurable shifts in immune activity. The Japanese gave it a name, Shinrin-yoku, or forest bathing, but the pattern has been observed far beyond Japan, across different climates and study designs. What's actually happening is less poetic than it sounds and more precise. Trees release volatile compounds into the air, some of the same molecules they use to signal each other. When you're nearby, you inhale them. Your body responds, not symbolically, but chemically. Certain compounds have been linked to antimicrobial effects and reduced inflammation, so the relationship isn't one-directional. The tree you planted years ago, the one that now casts shade across your yard, isn't just modifying light or temperature. It's part of a system that is constantly producing and exchanging signals, some of which reach you every time you step outside. It's easy to miss because nothing about it asks for attention. No sound, no visible motion, no clear boundary where the interaction begins or ends. You assumed you were the one sustaining the tree, and in part you are. But at the same time, without any deliberate effort, that tree has been participating in your environment in ways that extend into your own biology, quietly, continuously, whether you noticed or not. The space you move through each day isn't just a setting. It's active, responsive, involved, and most of what it's doing happens just below the threshold of what you can perceive. So here's where this leaves us. The trees in your yard are not still in the way they appear. They are signaling, through the air, through chemical compounds that drift farther than your property line suggests. They are receiving, through underground fungal networks that have been evolving for hundreds of millions of years, linking one root system to another. And they are allocating, directing resources, favoring certain connections, adjusting continuously to what's happening around them. None of this turns on or off. It doesn't wait for observation. It's ongoing, whether you notice it or not. So the next time you step outside, it isn't into silence. It's into something already in progress. An exchange that began long before anything around you was built, and that will continue without interruption. The yard doesn't become inactive when you leave it. It becomes harder to see. If this shifted, even slightly, the way you look at the trees outside your window, a like is the simplest way to register that. And if you want more of this kind of perspective, subscribe to Backyard Biology. No exaggeration, just the underlying systems most of us were never taught to notice. And before you move on, take a second and look around. How many trees can you see from where you're sitting right now?